Hello, everyone. I'm Alex Poliakov, and I run customer solutions at DBOS. Today, I'm excited to chat with Al Caraville, the CTO of Goblins. Goblins builds AI agents that offer real-time help to math students and allow teachers to track their progress. Today, we'll discuss how Goblins uses DBOS Transact and DBOS Conductor. So without further ado, Al, would you like to introduce yourself and talk about Goblins?
Hey everyone. Thanks for having me here, Alex. As Alex said, I'm the CTO and co-founder at Goblins. At Goblins, we're building America's favorite tutor, starting with K-12 math. We're in thousands of classrooms and thousands of students are using Goblins live, and they're really having a great time. And we're trying to make math education fun and effective at the same time.
And I heard you got a demo to show us. I'm really looking forward to what this looks like. Let's see it in action.
Hey, welcome. In a second, you'll get to solve some problems, and I'm going to try to help you. But first, let me show you a few ways I can help.
And here we actually cloned Alex. That's one of our features. We let teachers clone themselves to actually get that like personal feedback to every student in their classroom. And it we clone their voice, we clone their avatar. You can see Alex's avatar here. His avatar should actually we actually have animated avatars that should be activated soon, and we'll see if we can get that working.
For example, you can show me your work at any step, and I'll give hints or redirect you as needed.
There we go. We got Alex in avatar form. Let's keep going.
And once you get the final answer, I'll mark it right, and we'll move on to the next problem.
So I'll click through.
That's amazing.
Okay, your turn. Try drawing the answer, and then hit OK.
So Alex wants me to draw the answer. I'll do it. We got before.
Nice. Let me just erase that for you. You can also speak your answer or ask things like, I'm stuck. What should I do next? Or what's the formula again? Give that a try.
I'm stuck. What should I do next?
Coming in loud and clear. Okay, last thing. Try panning over to the right with two fingers or right click with your mouse. Perfect. Now try zooming out by pinching with two fingers or scroll with your mouse. You're on fire.
So this is like a canvas where you can solve problems.
And before we start, can I show you a cool trick that'll help you draw with your computer?
Exactly. So students have access to this 2D canvas, kind of like Figma, where
Okay, here's the first problem. Go on ahead. I'll be here.
yeah, so I can pan around, I can zoom, I can draw. Alex is here on the top left, gonna help me if I need any help. And what I'll usually do is we see students writing +8, and then +8, and it's actually very easy to draw on this canvas. And a lot of their students will actually use touch devices like touch Chromebooks, which help. So they'll get here, they'll actually do square root here, and square root here. And if you're very, very good at math, you might have noticed I missed something. And this is what a lot of students will learn in middle school and kind of like as they go into algebra, forget that something is missing. So let's see what Goblin says.
X equals 3 is one of the answers.
Yep.
But is there another number that, when you square it, also gives you 9?
So Alex, thank you, Alex, for catching my error. I actually made a miss something here. What square roots have usually two solutions in situations like this. So if a student could write x equals -3 here, I would give them the thumbs up. But what we usually see is that students don't know what they're confused about. They'll just have no idea that there's actually a second solution. So we'll hear things like, "I'm super confused and I have no idea what you're talking about."
Square roots are tricky. I totally get why you're confused. How about this? Hop into this lesson real quick. I'll teach you why there are two solutions to this problem.
So we'll take the student to this like custom dynamic lesson that's crafted specifically for them. So let's see what that looks like.
Let's start here. What is the square root of 4?
So square root of 4 is 2. As the student showed, they can get the square root of a number because they did it for 9.
What is the square root of 4?
Oh, didn't register there. Let's do it again. Or word flow didn't complete there.
Boom, that's right. The square root of 4 is 2 because 2 times itself equals 4.
So we'll kind of have this experience with the student where they will work in this interactive lesson so we can see it, click it one more time to see how that goes.
Now, things get interesting when we're dealing with equations. You might assume that x equals 2 here.
We'll kind of keep going, show them actually a graph where we graph x squared is equals 4 and show that there's a negative root as well. But we'll just skip that for now because I know we're limited on time. Let's close this. Let's say I learned the lesson really well. I figured out I know that there's a negative square root. I can add a plus or minus here, or actually just write it on a new line. X equals -3. And let's see if Alex gives us the thumbs up.
Ballerina cappuccino.
We say Gen Z brain rot phrases. The kids like them. Alex, sorry for making you say that, but
I never thought I'd say that.
that's exactly it. So that's Goblins in a nutshell, and we have a lot of cool analytics for teachers that we power using DBOS workflows as well in the background. So every response that the student like submitted there, there are essentially like 5 to 6 workflows that we kick off that are just like asynchronous, or sometimes they're in the loop. Um, yeah, that's basically it.
Wow, it looks so simple, but there is so much going on here. There's speech, there's handwriting recognition, there's cloning my face and my voice. And then the other thing that I know about your product is that there's also a lot in the background that the teacher can see about the students. There's like the teachers can monitor how the students are progressing too as they're using this platform. Right?
Oh,
So
exactly.
it's a lot of moving pieces. So can you take us under the hood and talk about how it's built in a in an overview, and what role does DBOS play in it?
Yeah, I actually have some slides from our meetup, so I can actually share that tab, and we can kind of go through. Um, so during our meetup, we were talking about like what are durable workflows, and we think of them as, at least in the Debo space, just code that we can write that we know will execute, and we can take as much time as we want. Like we can trust that this code will run no matter what happens. It might error out, but we'll be alerted that it will error out, but we can kind of fix those issues as they come up. But we're confident that we can drive it through uh, to the finish line of that code if we handle it correctly. And we're never going to be in a state where we lose data. So that's what we like about it. And this is really important in a classroom setting. So, for example, detecting student misconduct. So students say random stuff. This is just like with like LLMs. There's this like weird paradigm where they're not human, but we still can't you still need to be aware of like misconduct with students. So if they're violent or if they're aggressive towards an LM, teachers want to be aware of this, and we have a responsibility to report this behavior to teachers. So we can't let a workflow drop there. If a student says something bad and we don't report it, we are responsible. Um, so that's one of the workflow. That's what one of the things that we have a workflow for. Um, Summarizing classroom performance. So we will have these insights for teachers that flows in real time that we use LLMs for. But we don't want to do this on every response because it's going to get really, really expensive. So we use DBOS's debounce functionality, which Actually, the DBOS engineers built specifically for us after we requested
Mm.
it. So that really helps. So we'll debounce it for a few minutes, and then the assignment feedback will kind of like flow in. And if a student comes back after the debounce period, it debounces again, updates. But we don't run the summarizer 20 times within a given minute. There's a lot of activity for an assignment. So the debounce key is actually activity assignment ID here. Grading student work. So again, another great use of the debounce functionality. We want to, depending on the state of the student's work, we want to assign a grade at all times, because a student might give a attempt a problem, and then just leave. You don't want to wait until they're done to grade their work. Um, so to do that, again, dynamic debouncing in this case, depending on the status of the problem, is really helpful. So we don't want to grade on every submission because that will get expensive again. So we'll do dynamic debouncing depending on the status of the problem. Um, Syncing student rosters and grades. This is a great use of like a classical use of a workflow engine, where you have a sync workflow that must run, and you need to be able to debug if it fails for some reason. You need to make sure that it's like a singleton. You need to make sure like it's running on a schedule. All of this DBOS works obviously great for syncing workflows. Um, we've been using also DBOS for our marketing and kind of go to market, where DBOS's sleep functionality is great and makes like all these complex cron logic that you would do in the past or with like a queue much simpler. So say that you want to send an email to a teacher a day after they sign up in case they didn't make an assignment yet. So you can just kick off a workflow in their sign up, do a sleep, check if they create an assignment. If they didn't create an assignment, send an email. So that works perfectly. Evaluating students against state standards. We want to make sure this runs once because it's like we don't want to evaluate a student multiple times. And if we want to make sure there's only a single evaluation running, we don't want to have double writes. Again, DBOS is concurrency control flow. We actually have a singleton abstraction that we built around DBOS, even though DBOS doesn't officially support it yet. That works really well for this. Again, there's we use workflows for everything. Like the cloning workflow that you saw, where we converted you into our like Pixar
Yeah.
5 avatar. That's a DBOS workflow. That's also one of our more expensive workflows because we use an image model. So we want to make sure that we're only running that once per image, so it handles all the item potency on that level as well.
Can you talk about how you got to DBOS? What did that journey look like? Were you familiar with durable execution before this?
Yeah. So before Goblins, I actually worked at Stripe, and at Stripe we had this thing called the workflow engine. It was this abstraction layer on top of temporal, and the engineers there did a great job. They simplified temporal for us, and we could just make our code run, and that was really simple. And then when we started Goblins, I was like, wow, I really want this workflow engine thing. It really makes sense for us. And I looked at temporal and I was like, this is so complex. And I don't really want to set this up. I can see why they had a team doing this at Stripe. And around that time, we actually found another provider called Ingest. It looked very simple. And we started using Ingest, and things worked at our like scale where we had one classroom a week that was actively using it. It was like during the alpha days. Um, and then once we spiked into a few hundred, 1,000 students, ingest really started slowing down. And we had to in the way ingest works is that there are concurrency limits. So we had to keep increasing our step concurrency limit, which was okay. It was getting costly, but we were okay with it because workflow engines, again, make sense for us. And I think we were around like 3,000 students when Ingest started completely failing for us, where we had a lot of queues build up, and we were. It was at that point where we're just like, "Is this the right solution for us?" And Ingest had this very big outage, and our queue built up to thousands and thousands of events. I don't remember. I think hundreds of thousands, where we
Mm,
essentially fell so far behind that we could never catch up, even during our downtime. Like during periods of time where students were not using the app, because the next day events would build up again, and we upgraded our concurrency limits hoping that would fix it, and it just didn't.
mm,
And we emailed support, and we heard back after a few days saying they were going to prioritize it, and we just like never heard back after they said they're going to prioritize it. And we were at this point paying like $300 a month, which is not a big payment to like a bigger company, but we were still a very small startup at that stage where that was a decent bit of money every month to pay to provider. We just couldn't operate on it because the product just didn't work anymore. We were kind of frantic. We were like, what do we do? Do we just like rewrite our stack completely? And luckily, we had some good abstractions in our code that abstracted away the workflow provider for us, and we just had to go fast. We found this provider called Hatchet. We switched to Hatchet, and things started working actually, but
mm,
things like felt slightly off with Hatchet, where the ingest developer experience was actually much better for us. But Hatchet's performance was much better than ingest, where we had a lot of performance issues with queuing up on ingest, and also it would add artificial latency to all of our workflow steps. Where let's say a code that takes 2 seconds, 3 seconds to run would take 9 seconds to run.
mm.
I think this is due to the serialization between an external service. We didn't look that deeply into it, but that's what we suspected it was. Um, and Hatchet, I think, does this slightly differently, where they keep a persistent connection, even though it's an external service, so their performance is better. Um, but we weren't super happy with Hatchet, and but it had fixed like the hair on fire problem. That's around the time I actually saw I think DBOS in my ChatGPT chat and also Twitter at the same time, where I was like, okay, this looks really cool. I love Postgres. We're actually big Postgres fans. We use like a lot of um a lot of just like Postgres extensions, I would say. We love just like having one stack where everything operates from, and makes the developer experience much simpler instead of operating an external service or like
Mhm.
another service to maintain. And we switched to DBOS, and we kept the performance gains that we got from Hatchet, and also the developer experience that we expected from a workflow engine library. And it was actually faster than Hatchet because our our database is essentially like 1 millisecond away from our servers. So every workflow is just blazing fast, and we just have to manage our database load. If that's fast, also DBOS is fast, and we like having ownership of that because we can debug everything that's going on our Stack
Mm.
Overflow, saying hopefully your workflow provider or service isn't down. We can just say like our database should just never be down, and that makes it easier for us to operate.
Okay, so that's four different durable execution providers that you've listed, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's something. And hopefully fourth time is the charm.
I mean, I think this paradigm of having it all in the database makes a lot of sense. I just don't see myself going back to an external provider. Also, there's just like for example, we store student data, so we need to be really careful about the providers we choose to store data with. So I know there's like temporal has like a encryption and whatnot that handles the data transfer between steps, but it's just a lot easier if all the data is in your database and you can query it,
Yeah.
and you can. One thing we love about DBOS is we can literally do analytics around like how long each step is taking, and like our full observability just from looking at the database entries for workflows, which isn't really like advertised, but it just works because it's all in the database. It just makes a lot more sense.
Excellent. Excellent. Um, and just to clarify with the audience, you're saying that the way you run Goblins is the Postgres is hosted on your uh, site. What do you use? Do you use a specific provider or?
Yeah, so we used to when we first started on Devos, we were on Supabase. We had some performance issues due to load at the time. We kept upgrading, and then we actually switched to PlanetScale recently, and that's been really great for Devos because it's just really fast. We're using the PlanetScale Metal. So latency is like for most DBOS queries just like non-existent. It just instantly resolves. Which is and um we're actually able to tweak the queries that DBOS makes to work for our use cases as well. So we recently actually added an index that made our I think we were working on our singleton workflow, made that workflow a lot faster and actually contributed back to DBOS for people that are doing something similar. So having that open source query layer makes it so much easier because we just give Claude a cloned repo of DBOS and say like this query is taking too long, like figure out why. Claude goes and does that, and we can just contribute that back, and everyone wins. And we can't do that with like ingest is not open source, um, where the clients are open source, but the core engine isn't. So it's just a black box where we just have no idea why a workflow might be slow. And with DBOS, we don't even have to ask you guys. We
Mm.
just look at our database queries and say like, oh, okay, this makes sense.
Yeah, we had a cool episode where you guys found an indexing optimization. Talk about that. I think that's a really interesting story to tell. Remember that?
Yeah, we were so we had again, I think it was a singleton workflow where we were essentially querying for a I workflow queue name or workflow ID prefix,
Mm.
and we went to our PlanetScale dashboard and we saw this like one query that was just like eating up all of our CPU. Because we were essentially abusing DBOS to make this pattern work that we actually were using with ingest, and it was working until we added a lot of moved over a lot of workflows to use that pattern, and it just started eating up like 90% of our CPU time on our PlanetScale instance. And the nice thing is we could literally see it there. It said like this query exactly, like we could see the exact query that was taking up 90% of our CPU time. And we just copied that query, took it to Claude Code, gave it the DBOS repo, and said, figure out why this is slow. And it could find
Really?
all the indices that DBOS has indexed, obviously. Um, and we figured out, okay, this doesn't have an index. We added the index, and we could see CPU time just drop instantly. And we sent that screenshot of CPU time dropping to you guys, along with the code change, and it was merged like I think the next day. It makes it so much easier when it's open source. We that's and we have our Slack channel. We I know we bother you guys a lot, but you guys have been so responsive to all the changes. Like I think we also worked on a better TypeScript serialization together, and you guys have been great with that. Where we added super JSON support to steps, where
Mhm.
we can serialize non-serializable values that would normally not be supported by Node.js or Bun in our case.
Mhm. Wow, this is the first time that I hear that it was actually Claude that came up with the index. I thought you guys were really, really good.
We do this a lot now. I saw a Twitter post. We use something called Effect. And Effect is like this TypeScript library,
Mm.
and some more like a framework. And the Effect founder was like, "Our docs aren't that great. You should just be cloning the repo and asking Claude to like find you the right patterns." And it's true. It gives you better information. And uh, Claude 4.5 is out today, and you just ask it and just figure out from the examples from like it will literally look at the test files in the repo to figure out the optimal pattern instead of looking at the documentation.
Wow. Wow, that's something else. Interesting. So let's switch gears a bit and maybe talk about things that didn't go perfectly, or things that you did not expect about DBoS. What didn't go to plan, or what were some of the things that you were certain would go a certain way, and then you were surprised?
Hmm. Um, I think the main thing is, I mean, this is an issue with all workflow engines where running um a workflow from inside of a step is not possible. Where we had some like issues where we had to refactor code where a workflow runs, it calls a function in part of, in a step, and that step actually, like that function actually, so in some cases dynamically invokes a workflow. So you have these like weird runtime failures that you need to be really careful about. Um, Something that we're doing to improve that is using dependency injection by effect to be able to say like this function will actually call a workflow. So you can use dependency injection patterns to let the parent caller know that actually this function will interact with a workflow instance, so you should not be able to call it from inside of a step. Uh,
Interesting.
so then there's some patterns. I think this is just like a general programming uh, skill issue. So we need to
Mm.
figure out how to do that better. Um, Other than that, things have been pretty smooth. I think the main things were like we were missing debounce when we first started. We kind of made it work on our end, and until you guys were able to ship like an official abstraction for it, and then we needed singleton. Singleton we actually implemented on our side because it was like very easy. I don't even know if we need an official abstraction for it. I think it would be nice, and if we're happy to contribute it. Um, but I think it's just much easier to just you can just make things work without like wondering if it's not like the library will accept your contributions because it's just a database. At the
Mhm.
DBOS is just a database entry. If you can query the database entry or like mutate it, and you can see like the side effects of doing so, you can make whatever you want work and whatever control flow that you want work. Uh, Depending on the complexity, it can get hacky or debounce was kind of hacky at the time, but it worked. And now the official debounce works as well and makes our life a lot easier. I think Alex, you were the one that actually showed me how to implement the debounce pattern using events when we first started, and that worked perfectly.
Yes, yes. The events are generally interesting and perhaps kind of not apparent in the documentation. I think we're gonna make some take some steps to make some more content and just tell people about how to use events because they are powerful.
Yeah.
So what and recently and in that vein, recently we've had a lot of discussions with agentic AI users talking about the unpredictability of agents. The idea that sort of an agent, um, maybe kind of like the class or the dialogue in your demo. Um, it takes an input and then the LLM reacts to the input, and then you call another LLM to decide what to do next, and then you call another LLM to decide when to stop iterating your loop, perhaps,
Yeah.
broadly speaking. And so you can't really predict what path things will take. And so a lot of users have been talking to us about, you know, this thing took this weird path and prod and ran into a bug, and now we want to be able to reproduce that bug and fix it or verify that we have a fix or diagnose it or observe it. So, what's your take on that area of agentic development? Is that something that affects you, or have you worked around it by trying to keep things intentionally simple? And is there a role for observability and things like fork to play there?
Yeah. I think workflows help a lot with agents. The main thing that we like, so I think there are two paths. You can take like the naive path of saying like we're not gonna have workflows. We're just gonna cache all LM outputs using their inputs. The
Mhm.
issue with that, which is like something we did actually before we had workflows. The issue with that is like the LM inputs are not guaranteed to be stable. Say that you're entering like a date to the input or some kind of like other dynamic value, or it's just like a very long, um, like you want to give it a tool that's like dynamic and where the output can change. Um, it just gets very complex to implement your caching layer to keep that deterministic. It's just a lot easier to say, here's a step this LLM should run once. Like this LLM call should run once, and I just care about the output. And you can do this with like Redis. So you can give it like a stable key, but essentially at that point you're building a workflow engine. So why not just take DBOS and at whatever granularity you want, you can convert that into a step. and just cache the output, which makes um, the um, the workflow into something that's semi-deterministic, depending on where you decide to stop it or where it errors out. And this really helps. Like something that we commonly do is just go to the DBOS Conductor. Uh, Sorry, do you guys? It's called Conductor, right? There's so many apps called Conductor now. Uh, we go to DBOS Conductor, and we'll see the output of each step when we're debugging something. That's really helpful. We can use OTel, like we have our OTel set up for that, but it's just when you're doing it through Debus Conductor, it's just a lot easier, and we can see like, okay, this LLM ran, and this was the output, and now we're going to feed that output into another LLM call that will, when it completes running, it will be deterministic. Um, Instead of hoping that our engineers, or like myself, we don't write any buggy code that makes that LLM call input dynamic. So when we can just say like, this is this flow of the workflow. After it gets to this step, we know that it will never run again. It's just a very good abstraction and makes our life a lot easier.
Do you use fork at all for bug fixing or for upgrades?
When a workflow errors out, we'll use fork to rerun it. I think for upgrades, we have a hot take that we don't version our workflows. I know that's not the suggested way, but at least in our current setup, divert we ship so much code every day, like we do so many deploys every day, that versioning would actually break our application. We would need some kind of like granular workflow level versioning if we want to support that. But right now we don't version, and we're just careful not to break our workflows in ways that won't survive a code change.
Yeah.
But it's not great, but we're pretty happy with it. We'll see if we have an incident. Hopefully, we don't anytime soon.
No. That's good feedback, and you're not the only ones with that feedback. And we're actually working on some features coming out soon to make upgrades simpler along that line. So stay tuned for that.
Yeah.
Speaking of the future, what are some of the things on your roadmaps for the next few months?
I mean, a lot more workflows. We actually have a cool feature that we want to build. So we have a lot of conversations, obviously, with students, for Goblins talking to students, like, and sometimes it's really funny. Sometimes it's like, you can see the learning moments that the students having, and we want to actually post these publicly or like internally, depending on what the teacher wants to do. Say that we could anonymize the student and post a video of like the whiteboard changing and the Goblin tutor responding or the student responding without their real voice, of course, if the teacher gives us permission, and get that posted internally on like a school site or externally where the district could talk about how their students are doing so well because of Goblins, or even just on LinkedIn. So for that, we would use a workflow, converting each response to speech, and then converting certain things to videos, using some bum Node.js libraries where we can convert the way the image kind of evolves over time into a video. All those little things would be workflow steps or individual workflows, and
Mm.
we'd be able to convert that to an actual video at the end of the workflow by collecting all the steps. That's like one thing that we're really excited about. We just haven't gotten the chance to build it because we just have so much other like teacher facing and student facing stuff to build. Um, but that makes it Debos makes that so much easier, where we don't really have to worry about like, is this code gonna go error out, and we're just like wasted a bunch of money
Mm.
generating text to speech or generating some LLM call, or generating some avatar video. You can just say like, we'll just write the code, give it to Debos, and if it errors out, we can be notified that it errored out and rerun it using fork. And the output will just work, assuming we fixed the code and deployed it.
And any feature requests for us? Things we can do?
Um, I think the singleton would be nice for everyone else. I think it's a great
Mm.
pattern. I know you guys have the queue partitions now, It's kind of similar to a queue partition with a concurrency of one for a given key, but the only difference is instead of queuing up, it will snap to the current workflow that's running, like a singleton way. Where if you have a workflow running for IDA, let's say if another workflow takes off for targeted IDA, it would just snap to the in progress one, um, or like snap to the queued one, depending on how the workflow's set up, instead of actually queuing up. It's, I mean, it's like a mix of like debouncing and also a concurrency of one with the partition.
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah, let's talk more about what you'd like that to look
We actually we made it work with just like 5 lines of code, I think, by importing DBOS utilities.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We'll take the PR. Thank you. Awesome.
Yeah, that's the great part.
Awesome. Okay, so as we're sort of concluding here, what would you say about DBOS to someone who doesn't know what DBOS is? How would you describe it to another engineer?
I would say it's just the easiest way to write reliable and observable code at scale, and performance. I think there's just like no downside to using a workflow engine. I think the abstraction of like workflows and steps, it's just like a very small lift where you should just use it, assuming you're not having a performance it. Um,
Mhm.
I think previously with like these other services with that have an external service, I would I would find it hard to recommend them because they do add a lot of complexity. Um, but with Debos, the required complexity is just like so low that you should just do it. Where if you care about like actually not dropping any kind of events and making sure your code concludes, you should just do it. If you have some very like throwaway code and you just like trying to make it work, I would say you don't probably need it at that point. But if you're working with enterprises, or if you're working with students, or you're working with teachers, or you're doing some like um, any kind of like agentic LLM workflow, you should use workflows.
And finally, where can people find you and Goblins online?
Yeah. So actually, we're hiring founding engineers. So if you like to work at Goblins and inspire 1 billion kids to love to learn, you can go to goblinsapp.com/hiring. And on LinkedIn, I think you can just search my name, Alp Goblins, it'll probably show up, or Alp Caravel Goblins. My email is alp@goblinsapp.com. If you want to email me. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Alp. I really a pleasure and an honor to work with you, and a mission that is certainly dear to my heart, a very noble mission that you guys have, and it's great to know that we've been able to contribute to it. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Alex. This is great.